What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Point Kentucky. I am Hunter Mitchell, joined once again by former Wildcat Leah Edmond. Leah, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good. Well, we finally have two wins to recap on the podcast. It's the first time all season. We've been asking for it for, I think, like 6 episodes now. So shout out to Kentucky for finally giving us something easy to talk about.
Yes, it was so fun to watch this weekend. I was like, yay, a win.
Let's start with that Georgia match because that was one of the most exciting, but also I think maybe important matches that Kentucky volleyball has had in a very long time. Kentucky went down to Athens, played the Bulldogs, took the first two sets. I don't want to say easily because the first set they had a little bit of trouble, had to come back. But they really went up and had pretty much complete control, went up 2 sets to 0, and then Georgia stormed back. They had one of those highs that you literally warned about on the podcast week before, where they get really high and they get hard to stop. So they stole the next 2 sets, threatened to reverse sweep Kentucky. Actually went up three to seven in that final set. And Kentucky all of a sudden said enough of this, and they came back and won that. Let's start with that match, Leah. What did you see out of Kentucky in that five-setter that was really encouraging going forward?
Well, offensively, fantastic. It was very, very good. Brooklyn DeLay, of course, played fantastic again and was putting up numbers that I haven't seen in Kentucky in a long time, in
Yeah.
personal opinion. But she was fantastic. And I think overall, offensively, they finally had it kind of going. I mean, we saw that they were still struggling with Reagan Rutherford not being on that right pin, but you could
Right.
tell that as Johnny finally kind of got a little bit more comfortable, they kind of knew what they were doing and kind of got in the flow. And we also didn't see that crazy constant change of people on the court. It was the same people the entire game, which makes such a difference. And I think they did a really good job of kind of staying the course, especially when Sophie Fisher started to get hot. They didn't start freaking out. They didn't start making big changes. They kind of just kept doing what they were supposed to do and let her get her kills. That's one of those things where you kind of have to stop everybody. And I remember hearing the commentators say it. They did a good job those first sets of letting kind of one person go off and then kind of handling the rest, which is kind of what you want to do. You kind of let your best players, you let them go off, but if you can control everybody else, that's what usually wins the game. You don't want to have multiple people getting double digit kills because that's when you get kind of stuck. But I think they really did a good job of managing and staying the course because that place was loud and you could hear it through the TV. It was loud, it was packed. I've never played in that arena before, so I know how that feeling is of being that close to fans. So I think they really did a good job of focusing. The last two sets, you kind of saw them kind of lose that. And defense kind of, I feel like a little shut down a little bit. They were not doing a great job of staying in control and they started to make those errors. But then that fifth set, they started down low and somehow found their way back in because fifth sets are hard because once you get to like 5, 6 points ahead, there's really kind of usually it's game over. So they did a fantastic job of coming back.
You mentioned it on the podcast the night before. Georgia is one of those teams that they have lulls and then they have these highs that they look like a top 10 team. You're like, where did this come from? And Sophie Fisher really is the head of that snake. Casey Evans has been for a very long time and still to some degree is, but Sophie Fisher has really come in and lit another fire under Georgia, playing out of the middle for them. And we talked about it, she's a different middle. They use her out of that back row a lot, and Kentucky struggled a lot that night, trying to stop her when she went in the back row. Because again, we talk about it, it's not something that you're used to seeing. Mills don't attack out of the back row in college. We know that you did in high school, Leah, but in college, it's not something that you see ever. And so that half rotation where she was back there just gave Kentucky a lot of fits when Sophie was serving, and they had her as an option. But you mentioned it. Brooklyn DeLay is slowly becoming the player that you said before the season ever started could make a run at your kills record. And I think a lot of people, when you said that, thought, Leah, you're crazy. I kind of thought that too, to a degree, still kind of do. I'm not sure if anyone's going to touch that record. But if Brooklyn keeps the pace, we've seen her play in 4 SEC matches now, and she has either broken or tied her career high in 3 of the 4. Obviously, that outlier is that match against Tennessee, where she only had 5 kills and 4 errors, really struggled. But again, when you look at the context of that of Reagan Rutherford being out, Tennessee saw that with Rutherford out, Kentucky's only option was Brooklyn, and they really keyed in on her on that match. I think what she has done for Kentucky, stepping into that sixth rotation role in the absence of Reagan Rutherford as a freshman, still figuring things out, has been so wildly impressive. And again, I know Georgia isn't ranked, and I think sometimes we get too caught up in rankings and, what is there a number next to your name or what is your overall record? Georgia is a very good team. We talked about it. They took Florida to 5 sets in Gainesville. They took Kentucky to 5 sets the very next match. Like, that is a talented Georgia team that was in the NCAA tournament last year. They're going to make a run at it again this year. They've had some bad luck. The beginning of their conference season has been really difficult, so they're struggling right now. But that's a team that's going to give a lot of people fits. And so to come out of Athens with a win, especially after Georgia came back and, like we mentioned, stole those second 2 sets and really took all of the momentum. I mean, I was live tweeting that match, and in that 4th set, I said, Kentucky just has to find something positive going into 5th because you are down so big right now that if you start that 5th the way that you're playing right now, you're going to lose. And when they went down 3-7, I didn't think, you mentioned it, there was no prayer they were going to come back and win that. But Brooklyn, I think, had 5 of her 25 kills in that 5th set alone. Actually, it might have been 6. In that 5th set alone, she all of a sudden just said, "Get what we've been talking about. Give me the ball. I want the ball. Let me put the ball on the floor." And then for Elise Getzinger to come in on match point after having missed her previous serve and to drop a float serve as a middle blocker, what a bold call from Craig Skinner to call for that on match point from your middle. But also for her to pull it off, I mean, Lord have mercy.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying. I had my hopes high, but I was like, okay, she has missed almost every serve before this. What's going to happen? Because in my head, I was like, oh, he's putting in a serving sub. Like, game's too close to not. And he let her go back there. And then when it was a short serve, I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm like in between. I don't know if he actually called that or if that was like a miss hit and it just happened to work. Because it was in between.
The only reason why I think he called it is because if you watch it, the camera zooms in on her and she looks over and starts laughing, like is smirking, like she knows, he called for that. And I think he called for it because she knew, all right, if I can land this, they hadn't served short all match long. Georgia was not ready for it. They saved it the whole match. That's why I think she laughed, because she knew if I get this short and it goes over the net, they are not expecting it. Because a middle blocker, you never expect that.
It was a bold choice, very bold, especially as someone who was missing short in the net. That's a very bold choice, but it worked out. And so I'm like, I'm all for it. The game was over. I was like, oh, thank the Lord, the game is over.
And Leah, you also mentioned before that match that you projected that that Georgia was going to be defending a lot of cross court against Kentucky. They hadn't seen Brooklyn really hit line at all. They did exactly that, and Brooklyn had a lot of success line. What did you see from that regard from Brooklyn? Even Megan a little bit, but especially from Brooklyn regarding that part of the game.
I mean, it was very smart. Knowing Kentucky, that they went in and probably told them like, hey, this is probably what they're going to give you. And that was good adjustment. I hope that they were probably talking to her, telling her that she had line open, and line is not an easy shot to hit. They usually give you just a slither, and they were giving her about a ball's length, which means that it either hits the hands, it goes clearly, or it hits the pin. So not many options of things going right, but she did a great job at adjusting, because that is a hard shot to hit. And when that's not what you're used to hitting and you don't like as a hitter, I know for a fact, I hate when somebody kind of pushes me towards away, and sometimes it can get in your head. But she did a really good job of mixing up shots, still going off those high hands. Like, that's always an option regardless of what they're taking from you. But she did a really good job of adjusting to that and then railing it. And then Georgia still didn't make any changes after they saw that she was doing good hitting down the line, which doesn't make any sense to me, but it worked for Kentucky. And so it was really smart. That's a high volleyball IQ. That's just being really smart as a volleyball player, knowing that, okay, this is what they're going to give me, I'm going to take it. Because some hitters might still try to force their favorite shots and be met by the block, but she did a fantastic job of adjusting how she was playing to fit what Georgia was giving her.
And even in that match, we did see a lot of tipping, but the difference was it was purposeful tipping this time. Georgia was defending so deep that this time when Megan and Brooklyn were actually tipping over the block or rolling, it was actually what you wanted to see. We talk all the time, they need to take more rips at the ball, right? But in volleyball, there is no extra point for killing the ball harder or killing it softly, right? In basketball, you've got a 3-point shot and 2-point shot. That doesn't exist in volleyball. So it doesn't matter how you get a kill. It just matters that you get a kill. This was a strategic tipping, though. And that is what I really liked seeing from Kentucky. Megan and Brooklyn said, hey, I can tip in this match and it can be strategic. But that's actually, I think, a perfect transition over that match on Sunday against Alabama. Alabama is a team that has struggled in the conference. They hadn't won a set in the SEC until they played Kentucky, which you can look at and go, oh, Kentucky lost a set to them. They're the only team that, well, it's Kentucky. You kind of expected Alabama was going to take one because everyone gives Kentucky their best shot. What I loved, I texted you after this match, I believe, Leah. Megan finally took rips at the ball. We saw from Megan, holy cow, if this is what Megan Wilson can be, Kentucky goes to another level. And same thing from Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn obviously stole the show because she tied her career high, 25 kills again, in only a 4-set match. So in a whole set's less worth of points, she was phenomenal. She won SEC Freshman or SEC Offensive Player of the Week this week for a reason. But what Megan Wilson did, giving you 20 kills, only 4 errors, and hitting a 390 clip against the Crimson Tide, is something that I think is going overlooked a little bit right now. And that is a complete 180 from what we've seen. What did you see out of Megan that you loved on Sunday?
That was the Megan that I had seen in practice. That was like, okay, that's the confident, what she was ripping balls, and she would do that in practice. And in like my head, I was like, what is happening? Like, why isn't she? And that can have something to do with them rotating a lot and not really having a secure kind of starting lineup. And that also can be kind of the record. When you have a record like that, you're afraid to make mistakes. You kind of like, you're under a microscope. So she just looked confident. She looked like she was ready to go out there and just be herself. And it might be what Alabama was giving them defensive wise, but she just looked confident. And that's like what you want to see. And that's okay that it was a progression. It's okay that it took her this time to get there, because you're at the right part of the season. You're starting beginning of October through November. I mean, I remember seeing a stat during the game of like how many games Kentucky had like lost in October and November, and it was like under 5. Like it just doesn't happen. And that's usually because Kentucky has a history of hitting their stride in October and November. So perfect time to do it. Going into SEC, it's not going to get any easier. And I think that it was just confident volleyball. And I was just happy to see her be confident in what she was doing and still mixing up shots and things, but looking very confident every time she went up to swing.
Leah, I'm interested by this question because as an outside hitter, I'm sure you probably felt this. How much do you think what Megan has dealt with in terms of not necessarily playing as confidently as we expected to see from her, how much does that have to do with being scared to go up and rip at the ball because you don't know your back line well enough to know for certain they're going to pick it up? If I swing at this and the block blocks it, they're going to pick it up. How much does that factor into an outside hitter's mentality whenever you go up to rip at the ball?
It can a lot. I mean, I've been on teams that they did a not great job of covering. And so if I went up and ripped, it was like a 50-50 chance that if I don't get this over the net, it's probably going to be a point for them. So I definitely understand that. That wasn't something we saw a lot from Kentucky in the beginning, of them being able to cover shots, especially when they were intentionally putting balls into the block. And you could tell like they were intentionally tipping the ball into the block, try to get a repeat, and it wasn't being covered. So as a hitter, you're kind of like less likely to really go after the block because you don't know if someone's going to be there to cover you. And so I think the better of a job Kentucky does covering, the more confident the hitters are, because they can go up and be like, I know I can go up and rip and hit this ball as hard as I want, and someone's going to be behind me. Now, not mentality of I'm going to hit into the block every time and hope somebody's there to cover me, because sometimes that ball's going to go straight down and there's nothing you can do about it. But that definitely has something to do with it. As a hitter, if you don't feel confident enough in who's behind you and what's happening in front of you, then you're kind of limiting your options. So yeah, I could definitely see that having a play in mentality.
And I think when you look at, for example, Brooklyn, fans might say, well, Brooklyn's new to the team too. She's a freshman. Why are you not seeing it from Brooklyn? But Brooklyn was recruited by Kentucky, right? She's been watching Kentucky games. She has seen Eleanor play. She's seen Audrey play. Megan came here from Oklahoma, so I don't know how much she was watching Kentucky. She probably didn't know Eleanor and Audrey and all of them all that well before she was being actively recruited to come and be a transfer here. So you do wonder how much of that was just her acclimating to understanding, hey, if you go up and swing at the ball, Eleanor's got you, Audrey has you, Brooklyn's got you, they're going to cover you. And I like we talked about, I felt like against Sunday, she played with no fear. And if Kentucky can get Brooklyn and Megan to play with no fear more consistently, this team goes to another level. We have talked all season long. The problem is not the talent. And people on Twitter like to say that it is, oh, Kentucky doesn't have the horses this year. That truly has not been the problem. Me and Leah have been talking about that all season long. And it's not a matter of does Kentucky have the athletes this year. They have a team that is full of explosive athletes. The problem has just been they haven't been playing as confidently. And for Brooklyn and Megan to do what they're doing without Reagan drawing attention away from that left pin, teams know right now that Kentucky's main source of offense is going to come from the left side. because Reagan Rutherford is not over there on the right. So for them to be doing and putting up numbers like this without Reagan there, when Reagan comes back into the lineup, this becomes a very interesting team if Brooklyn and Megan can
Mm-hmm.
keep doing it. Look, you know you're not going to get 45 kills from your left side if you have a hitter like Reagan in on the right. It just isn't going to happen because Reagan is going to get so many. But if they can give you 3-4 kills a set and hit at a 280 clip, just average numbers for an outside, the offense for this team changes completely. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things that's really interesting for Kentucky going forward. We talked about it after that Nebraska match. Even though it was a loss, it felt like something flipped, that some kind of switch was flipped, and this team was about to make a breakthrough. Madison Lilly talked about it on the podcast that week. This team just feels like they're on the cusp of finally breaking through. We're slowly seeing it. And I know that, again, we're still waiting for Kentucky to sweep somebody. That's the one thing I'm still waiting to see. Come in and dominate someone from the beginning of the match to the end. Get that sweep. You do need to see that still from Kentucky. But I think these 5 setters and even these 4 setters against teams that have struggled, they're important for a team that is struggling with confidence to see, wait a minute, even if a team comes back and takes 2 sets and we go to a fifth, we've got it. Even if a team comes back and pulls within 1 set after we go up 2-0, we've got it. Those are the kind of things that are important. One more question I want to pose to you before we go to the preview of this weekend, Leah. Brooklyn's insertion to being a 6 rotation player has brought up another interesting question. Reagan is going to come back as far as we know at some point. Reagan has been Kentucky's 6 rotation player, but Brooklyn has had so much success out of the back row, arguably more than what Reagan has had. I don't know if that's just because Reagan's a lefty or what it is, but Brooklyn is
Mm-hmm.
finding the court from that back row more consistently than Reagan has, and she is a very capable defender. She's so big that she can get to a lot of the cross-court balls that some defenders can't get to. What do you think happens moving forward? Does Craig leave Brooklyn as that 6 rotation player, or does Reagan come back and she takes it back again and Brooklyn goes back into just the front row?
I think, there's no reason not to move her. I mean, technically, if they really wanted to, they could put a DS in for Brooklyn still right now, even though Reagan's not in, but they need that back row attack. And she's been successful. Like, I don't think changing that now, it'd be different if she was like struggling. In one game, she did really good. And one the game she's getting back, she's been pretty consistent with it. So
Yeah.
I don't see why they would take her out in the back row. It'll be interesting if Reagan plays back row. Now, playing back row, that right side is kind of hard. Playing hit and swing from that side of the court, it is difficult. I mean, professionally, we always have someone back row. There's always a right side and an outside back row. That's normal for us. So it just depends. And they also play opposite of each other. So most of the time that Brooklyn is back row, she might have one rotation that she's back row with Reagan. But for the most part, they'll both be, somebody will be front row, somebody will be back row the majority of time, which wouldn't hurt. So it wouldn't hurt to have Brooklyn back row when Reagan's front row, because then now that's 4 people running at you. So you'll already have 3 people front row, and now you have a 4th. That opens your offense up again. So I don't think it would hurt, especially if the front row is struggling, knowing that you have that back row that you can set as well. I don't think it would hurt to keep her in there. She's doing well. She's not a liability defensive wise or serve receive wise. So there really isn't any reason to change, but I guess we're going to have to find that out when Reagan comes back and seeing how much they might ease her back into it. So it might be her not playing back row in the beginning and then maybe getting back into that, but just seeing how things work. If it's better to have a bunch of DSs back there, back row, then that might be the best. But we've seen both, and we've seen how that's worked, because at some points Kentucky did have all DSs back row for all their pins, and they were losing and winning. So it just kind of depends on where the team is at in that moment once she gets back on how they're going. But I don't see any reason why to not let both of them play back row if you have the opportunity.
It's a good problem to have, right? If you have hitters that are talented enough to play defense, that means you've got some really good outsides and some good right sides. So it's not a bad problem to have. I know that Craig has talked about liking Reagan in the back row for her experience in setting. If for whatever reason she needs to take a second contact, she is talented enough setting wise that she can do so. So I know that's a very big, attraction for him in that regard. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch for going forward. Does, when Reagan comes back, do they both play back row? Does Reagan go back to being it and Brooklyn transitions back into just the front row? Or does Brooklyn take it? That's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Again, it's one of the positives that I think has come from this injury, just Brooklyn's growth, the way that she has performed both offensively but also defensively and out of the back row. Well, Cats have another big weekend coming forward. They go on the road yet again to Missouri tomorrow, and they're finally home Sunday against Ole Miss. Another pair of matches where you're not playing anybody ranked. It's by no means some kind of big time ranked matchup, but 2 more wins, they're going to be wildly important if you can get them towards that SEC race Kentucky's looking at 5-7 right now, which is obviously they started the season 2-6 and then 3-7. So getting those 2 wins last week was a big deal. You need these two again. They're not going to be something that are going to be crazy boosts for your resume by any means that the committee is going to gawk at. But if you lose one or both of them, they're things the committee's going to look at and go, oh man, that's tough. What do you think? What goes through your mind as an athlete when you're approaching a weekend like this where they're not ranked games, but they're still wildly important? What goes through your head as you're approaching a weekend like this?
I mean, you have to be super focused, and especially you're away, you're at somebody else's home. There's always going to be a home team advantage, even if you're the ranked team coming in. That team's going to have every motive to play freely and show off for their home crowd. So first that, and then second, finishing games. That is the goal. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to check off the box for Kentucky this weekend is I'm up 2-0, so I'm going to finish the game. I'm not going to be up 2 sets. It's different if you split them. If you split them, then have at it going back and forth till 4 or 5. But when you go up 2, you have shown for 2 sets that you clearly are more dominant than this team, that you are capable of beating this team. So you have to finish. So being able to see Kentucky play a complete game, I would love to see that. They haven't swept someone since non-conference. And I feel like going into SEC,
they haven't swept anybody all year.
Well, even better. We need a sweep because that's a complete game. I want to see them from start to finish play a complete game. And this weekend they had the chance to do it. They had the chance to really be locked in and focused. There is no pressure. There is no big hype of former Kentucky players like playing against you. There's none of that. It's 2 solid SEC teams. I'm not going to say that because I've definitely gone to 4 with Ole Miss multiple times in my career. So, and Missouri as well. So they're still well-coached, well-versed teams, but going up 2-0, you got to be able to finish. So that's my big goal for them is to go and finish. And how dominant. The best way that you can respect your opponent is to beat them the way you should beat them. And so I want to see them play complete games, not having a bunch of errors, not playing to the level of the people that they're playing against. And especially now that they're going to be back home, which is still something we haven't seen very often, them being at home. How can you finish a complete game when you're at home in your crowd somewhere comfortable?
And we talked about it. They do need to finally sweep people. I know sometimes coaches want to say, let's be in battles more. Let's be in these 4 and 5 setters to test ourselves. You also want the opposite. At times you want to come out and just put your foot on the throat of the other team and completely dominate the match. And that's the one thing from this team we haven't seen yet. We're still waiting for them to really dominate from start to finish. That Georgia match, it looked like they were on their way to doing so. They went up 2-0, and that second set, they really dominated Georgia, but they let Georgia back in it. And those are the kind of things that when you get in that NCAA tournament, when you let if you give a team hope in the NCAA tournament, it often never goes well for you. You cannot give the other team hope. And so these are the kind of things where you need to come out and say, we are a better team. We are going to show that immediately. Don't let it take an hour and a half and then you get into the 4th set and then show it. It needs to be a start to finish match. Come out and just put your foot on their throat. And I think that's what we want to see moving forward, especially when you look at their schedule coming up. They've got a match at Tennessee, and then 2 games later they play Arkansas at home. So you're getting into the meat of your conference schedule. Florida's coming up. We've seen Tennessee. They are right outside the top 10 now. They have not lost. They've lost 1 match all season. We keep talking about that Wisconsin match, that 5-setter. I had more sweeps this weekend. This is a Tennessee team that is incredibly talented. And the last time you played them was at home, and they absolutely crushed you. Now, you didn't have Reagan Rutherford, but still, they showed you pretty immediately in that match that they weren't here to play. That's what I want to see from Kentucky this weekend. Leah, let's transition to Acing It. I've been really excited this weekend because we're talking about you and your season. You will begin your season with Athletes Unlimited tomorrow. So it's a little bit different. For fans that don't know, the scoring and the format, it is all completely different. So I want you to break down for us what your season looks like, what this weekend's going to look like, and the next month of play, what all of it looks like. Break it down for the fans.
Perfect. So Athletes Unlimited is the league that I'm currently playing for, and it is only a 5-week season. So there's 30 matches total. Each of us will play about 15 of them in this next 5 weeks. And it's a very individualized, but also team-oriented version of playing volleyball. So there are points attached to every volleyball skill you do. So let's start with serving. So if you get an ace, you get 12 points, but if you make an error, it's -8. A kill is +8, but an error is -12. An assist is +1, but any type of ball handling error is -12. A dig is +5, and my favorite part, there are no error points. So if you actually shank a dig, you don't have to worry about an error point. So that's great. A good pass is +2, and that's basically, we say middle of the court to the 10-foot line and kind of like a little circle around that. It's a quite bigger area than you imagine is considered a good pass, but we have such incredible setters here that they can set anybody from that type of error. But -12 on the bad pass. So if you get aced, it is -12, and it's the worst. And then a stuff block is +12. And of course, block, no errors. We love that. So using the hands, getting used on the hands, don't have to worry about it. And something new this year is middles are now getting block assists, and that's +2, which is really exciting for them because they were doing so much work. And if you don't touch the ball yourself, it doesn't count. So a middle could have closed to me, but I'm the one who blocked it, so I would be the one that got the points. And so it's nice that they're finally getting points for being able to close a block and get there and help out. They're also, so basically that is a point system, and then we get points for winning sets. So we only play 3 sets max, and it's a running total. So we'll play 3 sets of 25, but we also add up all the set points. So the person who has the most points at the end, so if you win 25, 25, 25, you get 75 points. Clearly, the other team's not going to have those 75 points, so you win the match. But you also get points for winning the set. So you get about, I think it's 40 points for winning each set and 60 points for winning each match overall. And the crazy part about that is I have played in games where I have won 2 out of 3 sets, but I lost the match because we didn't beat them by enough. So it's like, let's say we beat them 25-23, and then they beat us 25-18, and then we beat them 25-23 again. That big point marginal is the reason why they won. And it really hurts. It sucks. It sucks so much when you're like, we won all the sets technically, but we didn't win the match, so we didn't get the 60 points, and it hurts you. So yeah, and then after every game, you vote on 3 MVPs who are like the 3 you think best performers of the game. So MVP 1 is the top one. You're like, they balled out, best player on the court. And then MVP 2, MVP 3. And so what happens is we get put on a leaderboard, and we're ranked 1 through 44. And all these points are combined and totaled up after every game and every weekend. And the top 4 point scorers are captains. And this is the fun part about AU, is that every week we play on a completely new team. So top 4 people draft whatever team they want to, and then they get to play with that team. So if you see that I got to draft this week because I was one of the top returners from last year. So the top 4 returners got to be captains week 1. And so that is my team. We are quite young, which everybody says, because I have a lot of just out of college or very close to being out of college, including Allie Linehan, which I am super excited to play with. That is Allie Sumler. That is her married name. So I'm super excited to play with her. Daniel Hart, Morgan Hence, we all know those names from Wisconsin and Stanford, Sydney Hilly. So super, super excited to have a good team. I think I got to steal with my team. I got away with some stuff because I think they're younger.
Leah
and so all the older girls are like, we don't know yet, so we'll wait. But I'm like, I know exactly what I'm getting because I've played with all of them. I got to play with Danielle in college with USA stuff, and Sydney and Morgan I've played in the past 2 AU seasons with. And of course, Allie, we've seen me and her on the court. So I knew what I was getting. So I was like, I'm going to sneak. I'm going to get these people. And it happened the last time I was captain. I got all these people, and we ended up playing so well. And then the next week, everybody destroyed my team and just took it all apart and took all my pieces, and I was left with nothing. So it's super exciting. So at the end of the season, we have 1 winner. So it's really cool. We have a huge, big closing ceremonies. It's just a really cool experience. They have so many foreigners. You have people from Thailand, Brazil, Germany, Spain, Puerto Rico. It's really exciting. It's really cool. We're playing on ESPN this year, which is super exciting. We get to play along college volleyball, and that was a big thing for ESPN is we have so much good coverage of volleyball right now that they're adding professional on that. So we'll be playing on ESPN and ESPNU, and we have the opportunity to get moved up to the bigger channels if it presents itself. But we start tomorrow. I'm super excited. It's so much fun. It's a ton of volleyball in a short amount of time. And sorry for the late times, but we are all the way in Arizona. And so it's definitely a little late for our East Coast family. But you can watch Kentucky tomorrow, and then you can pull my game up at 9:30 because they're going to get to sleep tomorrow. So they'll be done way before 9:30.
There you go.
But super exciting. Really just love this league and everything that they have done for us. It's really cool. We get a lot of opportunities. We all get to play for a cause that they get a percentage of what we make in a bonus at the end of the year because we get money for every set and match we win, which is really cool. And so they will match, our league matches that 100%. However many sets or matches you won, however much money you made from that, they match that. And it goes to a cause of our choice. So the past 2 years, I played for causes close to Kentucky football's heart. I played for Coach Schlarman's cancer foundation, the cancer that he had. I played for their foundation. And then last year, I played for on behalf of Chris Oates and his foundation. And this year, I'm playing for American Cancer Society because we've just had so many people in our Kentucky athletics family. And I've had many families and friends that have dealt with cancer. And so I just chose that as a way to honor all the people near and dear to me. But yeah, love AU. Really excited for this league. Super excited that everybody at Kentucky can watch because you got 3 Kentucky Wildcats playing in this league, which is exciting. And hopefully one week we can get all 3 of us on a team because that would be just amazing.
My mama has struggled with cancer for about 5 years, so I very much appreciate you playing for the Cancer Society. That's awesome. But we do have to talk about, she kind of snuck it in there. Her team is stacked. She got away with highway robbery with the people that you look at on her roster. I texted her whenever the rosters were announced a few days ago, and I was like, Leah, I don't know how. I don't know if you paid them off. I don't know what's going on. But whatever happened for you to draft these athletes, you cheated somehow. And if you don't win this weekend, Leah, I told you I'm going to roast you on the podcast next weekend. I'm going to have to because this is crazy. Now, the other cool news is you and Allie will be playing against Kaz Brown on Sunday. So don't forget to watch that match. Yeah. I've been waiting to watch Leah Edmond against Kaz Brown for about 7 years. I never got to be in practice to watch it. So I get to watch it on television. So that is going to be must-see television because you two really went at each other when you played together. So I can only imagine if she's trying to block against you, how that's going to be. It's going to be very fun. This weekend, it's going to be must-see television.
We had scrimmages this past weekend, and she tried to get me a couple times, and I was like, no. No. I'm pretty sure she aced me, though, and I was not excited. I'm like very hurt. She has a nasty serve. It like just comes over and just drops out of nowhere.
See, that's too many points that you lose if you do that. So you got to make sure you fix that up, or she's going to get you.
I have to, if I get ace, I have to like get 2 kills to like cancel out the ace. It's insane.
Yeah. They'll probably explain. I know that these are a lot of rules. Obviously, it's very different from what we're used to with collegiate volleyball. So when you tune in tomorrow, they will obviously explain all of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have point totals running on the screen, all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
so
yep.
Make sure tomorrow, after you watch Kentucky's match, they're going to get a sweep. We're putting it into existence. Make sure you tune into ESPN Plus to watch Leah's debut with Allie. Watch their debut, her season start. Do you play Saturday as well, or is it just Friday and Sunday?
Friday, Sunday, Monday. So
okay.
Friday and Sunday, I think I'm on ESPN Plus, but then all the games are on ESPNU on Monday, which is cool.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, make sure you guys tune in. She'll be tweeting stuff out as the weekend goes on, I'm sure. I'll tweet some stuff out just so you all can be reminded. But this season, like we said, lasts until I think the beginning of November. So you all can catch her and Allie and Kaz every week, which is really cool to see some former Wildcats playing professionally in the States, which is obviously the really exciting part about this because there haven't been professional leagues in the States until recently. So being able to see former Wildcats playing alongside current Cats is something different, but it's something that's really exciting for a lot of the volleyball community, especially here in Louisville and Lexington. So thank you all again for joining us. What a happy episode. No losses, all wins, talking about the pro career or the pro season starting. So a fun episode. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to try and get and hopefully, I don't want to tell who, but we're going to try and get a fun guest on for this upcoming week as we hopefully talk about some more victories. The Cats are hitting their stride, and I think this past weekend was a great example of that. Hopefully, this upcoming weekend will be some further proof of that. So thank you all for joining. We'll catch you all next week. Thanks, Leah.
See ya.